So when the deceased passed away, quite often they will need a little bit of help in being able for their loved ones to say goodbye. So that could be washing, dressing, it could be embalming, it could be fixing any trauma injuries, and again, reconstruction work is a big part of what I do. So my job is to make sure the care of the deceased is upkept at all times, dignity at all times, but also making sure the family have that chance to say a peaceful goodbye. I will be honest, I was probably feral at school. I wasn't what you call a normal good student. I'm embarrassed to admit that I probably caused my father too many headaches, but I did like science and I actually loved child development. So, nothing, when I was younger, this was not a profession I even thought about. It was nothing. I actually wanted to go into the army when I was younger. I lost my father and my baby quite close together. And one of the things when my father passed away was his funeral bill, and there was a charge on there for care of the deceased. Now that sent me wild. I was like, how dare they charge for looking after somebody? They're dead. Like, what are they doing? It happens to this day. And that's no secret. You just go through my comments on my social media how families are being charged anywhere between £75 and £150 for a 1 hour goodbye with their loved one. Disgusting. And it bugged me for years and years. Then I saw an opening for a job in a funeral home and I thought, "Do you know what, I'm just going to go for it. Let's just see." Because I wanted to prove myself right that I'd essentially been overcharged. I didn't get in the first time, but then the second time I did. And it went from there. And I was humbled really quickly. So originally, I started off as a funeral service operator. So I did the whole aspect, and you don't really get to do much of the mortuary side of things during that time. You're pallbearing, you're flower arranging, you're collecting deceased from homes, hospitals. If you've got the coroner's contract, then obviously you will go to scenes of death, things like that. It was only until I started watching embalming and I had the opportunity to go into the postmortems and watching that, I was like, this is what actually, no, I can do this because the care was so much more evident to me. Not saying the FSOs don't care, they absolutely do, but the actual care of that person for me was what I wanted to do. Um, the embalming course is expensive. It is not cheap, and that had to be fully funded. Very rarely people will fund that for you. I was lucky enough to be in that position where I was able to do that. And it could be anything from a year to 2 years, depending on who you go with. It all depends how long you can get with the tutor, because you might have one tutor and you're the only person. That's great. There was three with me, so that was lovely. Hospitals, coroners, sort of like public mortuaries, if they can get you in quickly. It all depends because you do have to learn about anatomy. You have to learn. It's not like you can just go into a body, embalm, and hope for the best. You have to be right, especially if they've had a post-mortem examination, because it's not going through your carotid the normal way. You are going to have to remove the bag of organs. You're going to have to go internally, and sometimes they cut so high up, you do have to make sure that you don't hit anything else. It's quite tricky. First lady I saw was a little old lady, and I remember her. And I was okay. I wasn't so surprised. The one that got me was the motorbike accident because that was a real first trauma I had seen. And I think that probably impacted me a little bit more because I was like, this is real. This isn't fake. This is very real. Then seeing the family come in, I think it was like 3, 4 days later, and hearing that, that was horrendous for me personally. Obviously, the first infant I had broke me. I'm not ashamed to say I had to go off sick for over a week. That really did break me, and it brought up my own issues there. When you have somebody who has sadly decided to take their own life by involving a train, I can't go into too much detail with that, but you get what I'm saying. It's- that stays with you, and I don't think there's been a person who has never been affected by seeing that because sadly they do not come in as you expect them to come in. And more often than not, they come in little bags rather than a body bag. And that's real. That's not on TV, that is very real. That's in front of you. Then you understand quite quickly that the family are not going to be able to say goodbye. And that's what hurts more. We can do what we can here. We can leave them at rest because there's not much we can do. But that family are going to need our support. And it's how you sit down with that family and explain to them, like, you know, there's not much there. Hear that, I could never imagine hearing that, but to have to be in a room having that explained to someone and seeing their reaction, that, yeah, that stays with you. A lot of them are blindsided. One thing the police do, and I don't mean to bash the police here, they will give them a few details, but they tend to leave it to the other people to actually go into detail. So a lot of family members do come in blindsided. Especially since my social media, I do get a lot of families requesting me now. So I do tend to have a lot more conversations with them at the funeral home, sit down conversations. And it doesn't always go the way they want it to go, because I think sadly they do seem to think that we can often make miracles happen. But if you have, somebody in our care who has been in a mortuary for so long, waiting for a post-mortem, or sadly, I hate to say this, but trauma, decomposing situation escalates quite quickly. And when I have to say to them, look, I have seen your loved one and I'm really sorry, but it would cause more damage, more harm than good, you see the disappointment on their face. And then they're like, well, why? Can you try this? Can you try that? And it's trying to explain to them, but being delicate without going into too much detail why we can't. That's really tough. And it's tough for them, I always feel, because in that position, I myself would be saying, please do what you can. But when, it's advised that the lid is closed and you see they're not going to get that goodbye, you kind of feel like you've actually just made their grieving process 10 times harder. So normally I'm evenings. So I'll go in, and the first thing the funeral director will say to me is, if we've got embalming in, it's you've got ABC. Family coming in this day, family coming in that day, this is the clothes they want to wear. And it's like, right, okay, so you prep your area. That's the first thing you would do. You make sure the machine's all nice and ready, you have all your equipment ready, and then you would go and assess the person. So you bring them out onto the tray. You might have somebody helping you because, again, I hate to use this term, but they don't always play ball. Leakages happen, things happen. So it might be that they need an extra wash. It might be that actually they need more done to them than what we originally thought. So it's about assessing, and then you only do one individual at a time. I know some embalmers are amazing and they can do two or three, but I can't. My ADHD won't let me do that. So it's assessing and then making a plan. The machine holds the embalming fluid. Now, before it used to be operated a different way, but now it's literally all buttons. It's lovely. It does it for you, but obviously we have to attach. So if, say, you've got somebody who's coming in for a standard embalm, not at a post-mortem, it's a straightforward embalming process. You make a nice little incision, about that big, and then you attach. And then you get the flow and you remove the blood that way. And then, you start to see the difference, and then the embalming fluid will replace that blood, and then you massage. So we start with massage, and that takes the most time. Ears, face, hands. If the lady's wearing a dress, we will do her calves and her feet as well. But we pay extra attention to the fingers and the face, because a lot of people seem to think their loved one has bruising, and it's not. It's livity, which is blood pooling. And in order to really get that embalming fluid around, we have to really work that and massage that. During that time, we also would like to start working on prepping the facial features. So we're going to put wool in the back of your throat. We're going to put a little bit of wool up your nose, sadly down in your other area, shall I say. We're going to make sure, as that embalming is happening, that we keep eye on all the body to make sure it's circulating, because you do get nasty blood clots. And then with that, you might have to wriggle that area a little bit. And again, if you've got like a 20-stone gentleman, that's not easy. So once that's been completed, the facial features, we would then start with the mouth guard, suturing, dressing, makeup and hair.
So typically, from the moment someone in your care comes in, what happens then?
If it's a standard death that's expected, they'll come into the funeral home, and then the family will come in to make arrangements. And during that time, the funeral director will go through what packages there are, what their options are, and the families will hopefully get to decide, rather than it be pushed on them, what they would like. That's when I get instructed, and it could be that they don't want an embalm, or they just want a embalm, and we go from there, really. So we never know from the moment they come in what's going to happen. It's normally within a week we tend to know what's going on. Most of the children, the infants and children, to be fair, the twins, which I've done a TikTok about, I had the family's permission. Obviously, I had never dealt with twins at that point, and I refused to embalm a baby, well, anyone under a year old. I will not do it.
Why is that?
It's personal. It's a personal thing for me. I know mentally I could not do that procedure. It would break me, and there are embalmers who do it, and they are fantastic. They are amazing. I know it would cut me up too much. These little twins, placed in the same coffin, and we had to do it in such a way where the parents could still hold them, but one of them sadly had already started to change. And it was really hard because no baby should be on a mortuary table, no baby should be in a coffin. But to see two little ones and knowing that, there's nothing I could do to stop what was happening, that was one that stuck with me. And I did a TikTok on that. The family gave me permission, and that one broke me definitely. Infants will always, I can handle trauma sites now, but infants will always send me over the edge, always.
Hayleigh, do you mind me asking with your own baby what happened and then?
She was stillborn. I refused a post-mortem at that point. I lost my father, so I think grief had a lot to do with that. I don't know the reason why I didn't want her to have a post-mortem. It was a case of I went in, didn't reduce movements essentially. They put a heart trace on, there wasn't a heartbeat. They scanned me, and sadly she'd probably been gone a day or two, they reckon. So that was that case.
That must have affected the way you work with families.
100%. 100%. I generally feel their grief. And anybody, you see comments on TikTok, if I've looked after their loved ones, especially their children, they've always said, you can see it. She genuinely feels that. And I do, because I know that pain. And one thing I will not do is tell them it's going to be okay. Because it's not going to be okay. They are going to live a very different, darker life. Yes, they'll smile, but they will feel guilty for it. And it's never explained. Once you suffer a loss of a baby, when you get pregnant again, the fear that is installed in you every single day, even up to the birth of the baby, you are terrified. You cannot enjoy your pregnancy. And sadly, I've lost 3 babies. So when I was pregnant for Rosie, that was the most traumatic pregnancy of my life. I couldn't enjoy it. I was absolutely convinced at some point she was going to be taken. Absolutely. When she was born prematurely and rushed into NICU, I remember saying to my ex-partner, Luke, her dad, we're losing her. And he was like, no. I was like, we're losing her. And thankfully, she's here. She's she's strong. But it's grief. And one thing I will never say to a grieving parent is it's going to be okay. The common one is your nose.
Right.
When your face starts to decay, your nose tends to cave in quite quickly. So the most common one is your nose. We use lolly sticks, or just simple little lolly sticks in half, straight up, bridge it, glue it, bit of wax, pull down, done. We can fill out your cheeks as well. So again, cotton wool's our best friend. I'm openly going to say that. I love cotton wool. That's a good one. Again, I did a TikTok yesterday where people, somebody asked about glass. If you've got loads of glass, how we would do that. Plausible wax, talc powder with a bit of foundation. We have little tricks that we can use. Also, if, there's heavy trauma, we would have to do a bit of stitching. It all depends on what's coming in and how we reconstruct. But there are people who come in, sadly, who have been completely lacerated across the face, and people seem to think they won't be able to say goodbye to them. That's not the case. We can certainly try. It's not going to make them look how they did, and I need to be so clear on that. You're going to see things, but we can certainly at least make a good effort. The difficulty is with trauma, you have a photo, but sadly that photo does not resemble what's in front of you. Again, with skin slip is horrendous. It's one of my worst things I see. If I know that I've got somebody in my care who's got easily over 50% skin slip, I panic, because I know if it's set on the neck and face, I'm on borrowed time. Skin slip is exactly as it sounds. It's your skin slipping away from you. It's your tissues breaking down, and essentially it's like a degloving process. And it's horrible for the loved ones to see, because they generally feel like they've been in the body store too long and that they're peeling. And it's not, it's just a decomposition process. You cannot fix skin slip. You cannot fix it. We can try, like we put cling film over your arms and your hands. With the neck, we can try, but once it's setting on the face, it's incredibly difficult to fix that.
Hi, and welcome to Deep.
We love making videos, meeting people and letting them tell their stories.
We really hope you're enjoying the channel, and if you are and would like a bit more,
We've just launched the series as a podcast on Spotify.
It's the full interviews uncut, so you can hear the whole thing, wherever you are, at home or on the go.
But no matter where you're watching the content, please remember to like, comment and subscribe, as it really helps the channel.
And don't forget to drop a comment below and tell us who you'd like us to talk to next.
Thank you. Now, back to our story.
Okay, cool.
A lot of people seem to think that mortuaries are dark, drab, eerie places. Could not be further from the truth. They are incredibly bright. To be fair, they're quite calm. you actually have time to think in a mortuary. You actually have time to reassess your own life in a mortuary. You have you have the radio on or whatever playing. It's not what you see on the TV. I've always said the closest thing that I've seen on TV to a true mortuary is Sherlock Holmes with Benedict Cumberbatch. Molly's Mortuary. Perfect. That is genuinely what it's like.
What do you listen to while you're doing your job?
Well, I have been told about my music choices a few times. Whatever's on my Spotify list. If we have somebody in who was a musician, we would play that. Children, we play nursery rhymes. The parents will get that option, and they didn't even know that was an option, and it is an option. It all depends, and I have been guilty of listening to podcasts on there as well. You don't have to have your loved one embalmed. A lot of people seem to think, and funeral directors, I'm not going to say all, but a lot don't actually tell you that. They would just put it on a package as standard. And I'll be honest, I've gone into looking after people and I've gone, why? Like, why? They don't need this. It's intrusive. Embalming is intrusive. So it's a choice. It's not something that has to happen as standard. Also, if you're not happy with the care the funeral directors are giving your loved one, you have the option to move. Or because you're at that funeral home, you don't have to stay there. You can move them. Up until the day they are cremated or buried, you have the right to remove your loved one and place them into a different funeral home. Absolutely. You are in charge. So it's important families know there are choices and ask questions. And I know in grief you don't. You just want somebody to take control to get you out of that situation. I'm fully aware, but you do have options to make your process easier. Well, we've had a situation recently, actually, and the gentleman wanted to be cremated. That was his plan. The mother, absolutely not, being buried. Solicitors got involved, and the whole time this poor gentleman was in a mortuary where he shouldn't have been. He should have been laid at rest. The cremation was booked, ready for that weekend. Well, the weekend coming up. He was ready to go on the Friday. The mother delayed that by near enough 8 weeks. 8 weeks, and that poor gentleman, and I say, in that situation, he was one suffering. He should have been laid at rest. Yes, funeral plans are good and they should absolutely be adhered to, but it is a grey area.
Are there any more peculiar choices you've seen?
Yeah, of course. So I spoke about this on another podcast about the gentleman. I thought it was a joke, to be fair. I thought they were playing a joke on me. He was trans. That's absolutely fine. He wanted to go extravagantly. That's absolutely great. But what he wanted to wear was very revealing. And I was like, I cannot do that. And they were like, no, it's here. It's in black and white. And the family were fine with it. His friends were fine. It was his way. But I do remember walking in that thinking, someone's going to jump up in the moment. Do you know when you just think, no, this ain't right? I was literally looking for a hidden microphone or like private phone or something. No, he wanted to go in a fishnet stocking. Now, I don't have anything against direct cremation. I think if you've got a family, I want a direct cremation personally. I just want to be put in a coffin, left alone, and off I go. If you've got a family who simply just cannot afford a funeral and they're going for a direct cremation, a funeral director should not try to change that. And you will be surprised at how often many do, well, for this amount of money, we can do this. No. And this is where I've come into loggerheads with a few funeral directors and gone, you shouldn't have done that. That's not okay. But I've also noticed people are against direct cremation. Now, what I will say is with direct cremation, what families aren't told is that often they're not collected straight away. So they are left in a mortuary for quite a while before they're cremated. Now, a lot of families aren't aware of that, and that can be quite upsetting. So I would say just be mindful. The TV adverts are all very beautiful, very calming and peaceful. But the reality is that sadly your loved one is in a mortuary for a little while, and it could be any mortuary. That's a point. And they're not often collected straight away. So I would be mindful of that. But it happens. Funerals are expensive. And if somebody wants a direct cremation, they should not be challenged on that at all. Respect their decision. It is their decision. Sadly, in death, it's easy to profit out of death. And I know I'm going to get hate from that from people in my profession, and I'll own that. I'll stand my ground on this. It's very easy when somebody's grieving to be told, well, actually, I think it'd be better if you had this. It only costs £300. Before you find it, it's £300, £100 here, £50 here. It amounts up, and it's very easy because when you're grieving, you just want to get out of that room. You don't want to believe this is even happening, but you've already signed that paper to say this is what's happening. Then you're left with a very big bill. Stand your ground. between £4,000 and £6,000 for an average, and that's not without all the extras. So if you want horse-drawn carriage, that's just gone up. If you want a whole bouquet of flowers, named flowers, like a complete service, everything, burials are expensive. People who go for the full shebang are easily looking at £12,000 up.
And so would you recommend to people that they do that funeral plan?
No, I recommend do what your loved one wanted. It's important that we have these conversations. My family and friends know what I want. I know what some of them want. It's important if somebody comes in and says, oh, he didn't want that, he wanted this. Well, what would your loved one want? It's their day, it's their last day on this planet. You're saying goodbye, give him what he would like. Okay, reasonable. Some people might be a bit out there, but no, it's not for me to say this is what I think they should do. It's what would your loved one want you to do? The best bits of my job is actually knowing that I've achieved a peaceful goodbye for somebody. There is nothing worse than hearing a family being told they cannot say goodbye. That is heartbreaking because that's going to impact their grieving process. And a lot of it is they don't want to believe they've died because they've not seen them. That's trauma. That's traumatic. So knowing that they've had a peaceful goodbye and that I was able to provide that gives me a sense of comfort, most definitely. But also knowing that me and my team, I have a fantastic team. I am going to sing their praises tenfold. We do care. And I have to be honest, there's not many people in this job I've gone and seen and gone, oh God, you shouldn't be doing this. I've seen really good, and I've learned so much of people who I've seen them do something and I've gone, that's amazing. I'm going to implement that to my day to day. But also knowing that I do maintain the deceased dignity at all times. Because in some situations, it's out there, that's not happened. And that breaks me. The whole incident, for instance. What were the staff? Like the staff, he had staff. Why did no one whistleblow that a lot sooner?
Can we talk more about that incident?
Of course.
Yeah.
The whole incident was the gentleman who families thought their loved ones had been cremated and they actually hadn't been. They were finding remains that should have been cremated and hadn't been. I think everybody in the profession was truly rocked by that. He was keeping deceased in body stores that weren't even working. He was also operating a garage in the mortuary where he was fixing up bikes in the mortuary. The photos have been circulated amongst all our WhatsApp groups, all of them across the UK. And yet he had staff who not one member of staff thought, hang on a moment, this isn't right. And there was no mortuary register. He had no mortuary register. It's changed my life in the fact that I am very grateful for my life. I am very grateful. Before I used to moan if I couldn't get my Botox done on time. I'd be like, oh my God, if my lip fillers went a bit wonky, I would absolutely have a fit. But now it's not even important. I don't care. If I couldn't get out on my horse, I would be screaming, oh, my life is so stressful. No, it's not. So in that respect, I've calmed a lot. Don't get me wrong, I still have my wild days as much as everybody else. But you do value life. You see how quickly life is taken away. Somebody said goodbye before they went to work or before they went to the gym and it was taken that quick. So you do appreciate every single day. There are times where I drive home and I cry and I do sit and think about the families and I just think they're going through hell right now. And I'm going home and I'm tucking my children into bed knowing that somebody has lost their loved one. That can be really hard on me sometimes, as my team as well. Also, sometimes it's a thankless job. And when you've really worked 4 or 5 hours on somebody and the family come in and go, no, I'm not happy with that. They never look like that. That's hard because you've upset them. You don't want to upset them, but also they've not seen the work that's gone in. And they don't always understand that we cannot work miracles. We cannot do that. Trying to explain that to somebody who's grieving and desperately want their loved one to look like them, that makes you feel guilty. I go away feeling so guilty about that. I really never expected my TikTok to go the way it did, ever. But I wanted to reassure people that we do care about your loved ones, but also you do have options and that actually whilst you're at home worried about what's happening, know they're being cared for. Because it was back, say 5-6 years ago, you wouldn't have seen anything like this. You wouldn't have. And there wasn't much discussion about it. And I think it's important to talk about death. Sadly, it's going to happen to us all. And when that time comes, it's important that everyone around you knows what your wishes are to make it a peaceful process. Because when you've got families in conflict, ultimately, they don't think it this way, but it's true. It's your deceased loved one who's suffering because they're now decomposing in a mortuary when they should be laid at rest. Rest in peace. And that often gets forgotten. Ask questions. That's what our job is. We are here to answer. And that's what my TikTok's about. It's not about me to say, you must do this, you must do that. No, there are options. And if those options can't be done, then we will try to help. But if we can't help, it's about being honest and saying, well, sadly, this situation is not going to change. I did a video today and I've already had over 80 messages about this video alone and what their loved ones had gone through. Messages, direct messages. Yeah. That's why I always say to people, don't message me on TikTok because I'm never going to get through them. Instagram. Go on Instagram because I'm likely to respond. So, and they do send me pictures of their loved ones and ask for my advice on that. And I'm very truthful. If I feel that the care has not been great, I will say that. But 9 times out of 10, I'll say, sadly, that is just normal. 90% of my trollers are actually people in the profession. One of them actually lost her job in the NHS because she continuously attacked my child when she was in NICU on my TikToks. And it turned out that she went to her managers to do the same thing I was doing. They refused her for whatever reason. They said, no, that's not what's going to happen. So she took it upon herself and I called the police. I had to, because this wasn't just like a few days. This was weeks and weeks. And I had a child in NICU and she was horrendous. Some of the comments, which again, I shared on TikTok, I was very open about that. And it turned out she actually did the same job for the NHS.
Wow.
Well, she worked in an NHS hospital. So actually she was higher than me. And yeah, she subsequently lost her job. We do care every day for them. We check on them twice daily. We have what's called a body school and we check on them. They're not just left in a body store to stay there. We do check on them. We refer to them as their first names if they want to be referred to their first names. Family might say, no, he wouldn't have liked that. Refer to him as Mr. So-and-so. We do keep dignity intact. When they're on the mortuary table, we do cover their dignity always. I will put a flannel over their face as I'm doing things down there. So the embarrassment side of things, and I know that sounds crazy, we generally, the amount of care that goes into looking after your loved one is often unheard of, but it's there, very much so. I think people seem to think to dress and wash a loved one only takes half hour. It really doesn't. A lot of work goes into that.